Figure skating is often celebrated for its elegance, precision, and breathtaking athleticism, but behind the glittering costumes and soaring jumps lies a stark reality. The sport can be perilously unforgiving. While the Olympic stage is where legends are born, it has also witnessed moments of tragedy that shook the skating world to its core. From sudden medical emergencies to catastrophic accidents on the ice, some athletes' promising careers and lives were cut tragically short. In this video, we look at 5 of the most devastating Olympic figure skating deaths, exploring the circumstances that turned moments of triumph into heartbreaking loss. February 15, 1961. A Boeing 707 descended through gray Belgian skies, preparing to land at Brussels Airport. On board were 72 people. Among them, the entire U.S. figure skating team, coaches, officials, and family members traveling to the World Championships in Prague. They never arrived. At approximately 10:00 a.m., as the aircraft approached the runway, something went wrong. Witnesses reported the plane banking strangely. Others described it as a sudden, unnatural roll. Moments later, it plunged into a field near the village of Berg Kampenhout, erupting into flames. There were no survivors. But what happened in those final seconds remains a subject of lingering unease. The passenger list read like the future of American figure skating. Among the dead was legendary coach and former Olympian Maribel Vincent Owen, a 9-time U.S. national champion who had competed in the 1932 and 1936 Winter Olympics. With her were her daughters, Laurence Owen, 16 years old, reigning U.S. ladies champion and 1960 Olympian. Just days earlier, she had appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated, dubbed America's most exciting girls skater, Maribel Owen, a national pairs champion and Olympic competitor. Also aboard, national champions, promising teenagers, judges, officials, even parents accompanying their children. The team represented not just talent, but momentum. The 1960 Olympics in Squaw Valley had signaled a new era of American strength in figure skating, and in a single morning, it was gone. The official investigation concluded that the crash likely resulted from a malfunction in the aircraft's stabilizer adjustment system during landing approach. In simple terms, a mechanical failure that made recovery impossible at low altitude. But the findings never completely silenced speculation. Some witnesses insisted the plane appeared to attempt a sudden maneuver. Others questioned whether pilot error, structural issues, or even unforeseen weather complications played a role. In 1961, commercial jet travel was still relatively new. The Boeing 707 was modern and advanced, yet aviation safety standards were still evolving. There were no black boxes recovered with the sophistication we rely on today. No cockpit voice recordings to reconstruct final words. Just debris in a frozen field and 72 lives extinguished. For families back home, answers felt incomplete. The impact rippled far beyond Belgium. The 1961 World Figure Skating Championships were canceled out of respect. The United States suddenly had no national team. Coaches were gone. Development pipelines vanished overnight. For years, American skating struggled to recover. It wasn't just athletes who were lost, it was institutional memory, mentorship, and leadership. Entire training systems had to be rebuilt from scratch. Out of tragedy came reform. The U.S. Figure Skating Memorial Fund was established to support future skaters, a quiet but powerful commitment that the sport would not disappear. Yet even decades later, the shadow lingers. Every February, the skating world pauses, not just to remember names, but to remember potential routines never performed, Olympic medals never won, careers never realized. The ice has long since been resurfaced. But for those who know the history, February 15, 1961, remains the day the music stopped and the silence was absolute.
I'm just praying that somebody's pulling her out of the river right now as we speak.
January 29, 2025. The night sky over Washington, D.C. was calm, routine. Commercial aircraft moved in steady patterns toward Reagan National Airport, their descent paths choreographed with military traffic that frequently shares the capital's tightly controlled airspace. Then, in seconds, something broke that choreography. American Airlines Flight 5342, was approaching its landing corridor when it collided midair with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. Witnesses described a flash, a burst of fire suspended against the darkness before wreckage fell toward the Potomac River below. Both aircraft were lost. There were no survivors. 67 lives ended in a matter of moments. Among the passengers were figure skating coaches, young athletes, and parents returning from a national development camp, a place where Olympic dreams quietly take shape long before the world notices. On board were former world champions and Olympians Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov, a celebrated pairs team who had transitioned from competitive glory to mentorship. After representing their country on the Olympic stage and winning the 1994 World Championship, they dedicated their post-competitive lives to coaching in the United States. To their students, they weren't just champions. They were architects of the next generation. That generation was on the plane with them. The airspace around Washington is among the most regulated in the world, layered with civilian routes, military corridors, restricted zones, and security protocols. Every movement is tracked. Every clearance is deliberate. So, how did two aircraft converge at the same altitude? Investigators immediately began examining radar logs, air traffic control communications, flight paths, and military coordination procedures. Early reports pointed toward possible miscommunication or timing miscalculations within one of the most complex aviation environments in the country. But complexity does not equal inevitability. The question lingered. In one of the most monitored skies on Earth, how could separation fail? Search crews worked through freezing waters of the Potomac River, recovering wreckage and victims in a painstaking operation that stretched for days. Families gathered in quiet rooms across the country, waiting for confirmation no one wanted to receive. Within the skating community, disbelief turned to devastation. These weren't distant professionals traveling alone. These were parents sitting beside their children, coaches reviewing routines on tablets, athletes discussing jumps they hoped to master by next season. Suit bags were recovered from the wreckage, costumes still packed for future competitions that would never happen. Figure skating is a small world. Coaches train competitors who grow up together, compete against each other, and eventually teach the next wave. When tragedy strikes, the ripple is intimate. Rinks across the country dimmed their lights. Skates were placed at center ice in silent tribute. Memorial programs replaced practice sessions. Olympic hopefuls suddenly found themselves grieving the very mentors guiding their dreams. The loss wasn't just measured in medals or titles. It was measured in unfinished lessons, in choreography that would never be completed, in children who lost parents and parents who lost children in the same night. As investigations continued, attention focused on air traffic control sequencing, military flight procedures, altitude assignments, and collision avoidance systems. In a city built on layers of redundancy and oversight, the public demanded clarity. Was it human error? Systemic oversight? A breakdown in communication between civilian and military channels? For the skating world, however, the technical findings could never fully answer the emotional question, why this flight? Unlike the 1961 disaster that erased an entire national team at once, this tragedy struck at the developmental heart of the sport, the pipeline of future Olympians. Some of the young skaters aboard had not yet competed internationally. Their names were not widely known, but within their rinks, they were already stars. January 29, 2025 became another date etched into skating history, a reminder that even in modern skies, with advanced radar and layered safeguards, vulnerability still exists. The ice would open again. The competitions would continue. But for many in the skating community, every takeoff after that night carried a quieter, heavier awareness that sometimes even the most controlled paths can cross in the dark.
I was watching them staying next to each other and being nice to each other, taking care of each other, and I thought, this romance will last.
November 20th, 1995. The rink in Lake Placid was quiet except for the sound of blades carving ice. It was just a rehearsal routine, a controlled part of the upcoming Stars on Ice tour. No roaring Olympic crowd, no flashing cameras, just professionals perfecting timing and lifts. Then, without warning, Sergei Grinkov collapsed. At first, Some thought it was part of the choreography. Pair skating demands strength and dramatic movements. A fall isn't unusual, but this wasn't a misstep. This was something else. He did not get up. Grinkov wasn't just any skater. With partner and wife Ekaterina Gordieva, he had dominated pair skating for nearly a decade. Together, they won Olympic gold at the 1988 Calgary Games, and again at the 1994 Lillehammer Games, a rare feat that cemented their status as legends. Their style was different. Less theatrical tension, more seamless unity, effortless lifts, deep edges, a quiet confidence that made the difficult look natural. Off the ice, they were a love story the public followed closely. Married in 1991, parents to a young daughter, they seemed inseparable, partners in sport and life, which made what happened that day feel even more unreal. He was 28 years old, elite condition, peak physical strength, yet the cause was a massive heart attack triggered by a congenital coronary defect, a condition that had gone undetected. An artery was abnormally narrow from birth, limiting blood flow to the heart. Under extreme exertion, it became fatal. There had been no clear warning signs. In elite athletics, medical screenings are standard, but in the mid-1990s, advanced cardiac imaging capable of detecting such rare anomalies was not routinely performed on athletes without symptoms. The question lingered quietly through the skating world. Could it have been found? Could it have been prevented? Even today, that answer remains complicated. Witnesses later described the atmosphere inside the rink as surreal. Coaches rushed forward. Emergency responders arrived quickly. CPR was performed. Efforts continued for hours, but the outcome did not change. For Gordieva, who had just skated beside him moments earlier, the loss was not only professional, it was deeply publicly personal. One half of skating's most celebrated pair was suddenly gone. The news rippled globally within hours. Olympic champions rarely die young. Olympic champions almost never collapse mid-career, mid-season, mid-life. The skating world felt exposed. Grinkov's death was singular and intimate. It didn't erase a generation. It fractured a partnership that had defined an era. There was no mechanical failure, no investigation board reconstructing wreckage. Just a human heart that stopped beating on cold ice. In the months that followed, discussions about cardiac screening in elite athletes intensified. Awareness campaigns gained urgency. The idea that peak fitness equals invincibility was quietly dismantled. At 28, Grinkov's career was still active. There were more tours planned, more routines are evolving, more performances waiting to be created. Instead, his final image remains that of a champion mid-glide, in control, until he wasn't. Today, when footage of Gordieva and Grinkov is replayed, the lifts, the soft landings, the synchronized breathing, there's a different weight to it. Not just admiration, fragility. Because sometimes, even at the highest level of physical perfection, the most devastating danger is the one no one can see. And on that November morning in 1995, the ice bore witness to a silence that no applause could ever fill.
Always managed to produce as a good training atmosphere for the serious competitive skaters.
In the winter of 1961, Steffi Westerfeld was standing at the edge of something extraordinary, and the world of figure skating was beginning to take notice. Born on October 8, 1943, in Kansas City, Missouri, Stephanie was more than just an athlete. She was an honor student, a pianist, and even a homecoming queen at Cheyenne Mountain High School, achievements that spoke to a life full of promise both on and off the ice. She had recently finished second at the 1961 U.S. Figure Skating Championships, earning her a coveted position on the American team bound for the World Figure Skating Championships in Prague, a breakthrough that marked her shift from rising talent to genuine international contender. But Stephanie would never step onto that world stage. On February 15, 1961, she boarded Sabena Flight 548 in New York with her teammates, coaches, officials, and family members, including her older sister Sharon, who had accompanied her as a chaperone and fellow skater. The Boeing 707 was on a routine transatlantic flight toward Brussels, a planned stop before continuing on to Czechoslovakia. But as the jet approached Brussels airport that morning, something went terribly wrong. After aborting its landing approach, the aircraft struggled to maintain control and ultimately crashed into a field near Berg Kampenhout, killing all 72 people on board, including every member of the U.S. figure skating delegation and one person on the ground. Among the fallen were not only established champions and household names, but also skaters like Steffi, whose potential was still unfolding. While legends such as U.S. champion Bradley Lord and national title holder Laurence Owen were already turning heads, Westerfeld embodied the next wave of American talent. Disciplined, technically gifted, and poised for growth. The loss of her sister Sharon alongside her deepened the personal tragedy. They were buried together in Evergreen Cemetery in Colorado Springs, a quiet echo of what should have been a shared memory of triumph on the world stage. In the wake of the crash, the figure skating world reeled. Championships were canceled, hearts were broken, and the very fabric of American skating was torn. Officials later noted that it could take years for the sport to recover, and in many ways it did. The tragedy reshaped policies, such as never allowing an entire team to fly together again, and inspired the creation of the U.S. Figure Skating Memorial Fund, which has since helped generations of skaters pursue their dreams in honor of those who never got the chance.
The next skater looks like an American Leslie Caron, is Laurence Owen.
Just 10 days before her death, Laurence Owen smiled from the cover of Sports Illustrated. The rare distinction of a teenage skater being bestowed such visibility in a magazine not yet saturated with figure skating coverage. The headline introduced her as America's most exciting girl skater, a phrase that captured both her competitive promise and her magnetic public appeal. At 16 years old, she was poised, articulate, and already carrying the quiet confidence of someone who understood she was on the brink of something extraordinary. By early 1961, Owen was not only the reigning U.S. ladies champion, but one of the brightest prospects in international skating. She had competed at the 1960 Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley, the youngest American woman in the field, and had impressed judges and audiences alike with her elegant carriage and expressive interpretation of music. Coaches described her as disciplined and refined. Commentators praised her musicality and technical precision. Fans saw a star in young bloom. Then, on February 15, 1961, she boarded Sabena Flight 548 alongside her teammates, family, and coaches. The flight was destined for the World Figure Skating Championships in Prague, an event she was widely expected not just to compete in, but to contend for gold. She never reached Europe. Laurence wasn't just another national champion. She represented a turning point in American ladies skating, youthful yet polished, elegant but competitive, someone who bridged the balletic grace of earlier eras with the athletic power that would define the sport's future. At 16, she was already balancing athletic maturity with the brightness of adolescence, an embodiment of both imminent achievement and unspent youth. There was something distinctly cinematic about her rise, from Sunday rinks to Olympic ice, from regional competitions to national titles, culminating in that iconic magazine cover that seemed to say, "Watch this one." The image lingered because it wasn't just a portrait, it was a promise. Instead, it became a frozen image, forever 16, forever ascending. On that flight was also her mother and coach, Maribel Vinson Owen, herself a two-time U.S. ladies champion, a multiple national title holder, and one of the most respected figures in American skating history. Maribel had taught Laurence to skate almost before she could walk, and the two had shared not only familial bonds, but a professional partnership rooted in excellence and relentless dedication. The pairing was symbolic, past and future of the sport traveling together, experience guiding youth, a dynasty in motion. Both were lost in the same crash. The emotional weight of that dual loss reverberated far beyond competition standings. It was a family extinguished mid-chapter, and in a sport already defined by its personal narratives, this struck a particularly deep chord. Laurence Owen's death is often singled out not only because of how visible her promise was, but because her story was already being told in real time. America had begun to invest in her journey, not just as a competitor but as a young woman poised to represent a new generation on the world stage. Would she have become a world champion? An Olympic medalist in 1964? The face of a new era of American skating? No investigation report could measure that loss. When Sabena Flight 548 fell from the sky, it erased an entire team. But in Laurence Owen, it erased something else: inevitability. The feeling that a star was certain to rise. Her technical skills were already evolving. She had begun incorporating more demanding combinations and expressive choreography at a time when the sport was on the cusp of transformation. Teammates later remembered her not just for her command on the ice but for her humility off it. A teenager who could laugh with friends, console the disappointed, or offer encouragement to newer skaters nervously awaiting their turns. More than 6 decades later, her name remains one of the most recognized among the victims of 1961, not because she had the longest resume, but because she stood on the edge of history. Her life became a symbol of potential interrupted, a touchstone for what the sport had lost. The cover photo still exists. The routines survive in grainy archival footage. The headlines remain archived in libraries and digital collections. But the applause that was meant to follow her career never came.